It scares the hell out of me, I can tell you that, because those polls are matching what I hear on the ground here in Ohio and what my friends are hearing, across the country, is that they want a new politics. They want to move in another direction. They don't want Biden to run, and they don't want Trump to run. This is not breaking news. I don't think the president should run. I don't think Trump should run. I don't think President Biden should run.
Former Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan is the latest Democrat to openly call for President Joe Biden to drop out of the 2024 presidential race. Now, the latest New York Times Siena College poll, which we did talk about in great detail yesterday, is really leading to these individuals ringing the alarms, encouraging Biden to really rethink running for re-election because of what's at stake here. Now, remember what I said when I initially covered the New York Times Siena College poll. Biden can't, on one hand, say that Trump poses a massive threat to this country, a massive threat to the democracy, while simultaneously insisting that he run for a second term, knowing full well that poll after poll shows him to be either neck and neck with Donald Trump, or in some cases even trailing Donald Trump. But that New York Times Siena College poll shed light on something even more important, which is when it comes to key battleground states, Biden's actually trailing Trump. And we also have some new details about this poll, which I'll get to in just a moment. You don't want to miss the details on that. But just as a refresher, or in case you missed the original reporting on this, I want to give you the results in regard to these key battleground states. So if you look at this chart, it'll show you exactly what we are referring to. So when you look at Nevada, Trump leads Biden by 10 points. In Arizona, Trump leads Biden by 5 points. In Pennsylvania, Trump leads Biden by 4 points. Georgia, it's 6 points. Michigan, 5 points. In Wisconsin, Biden is leading Trump by 2 points. But obviously, based on these results, if they actually stayed the same on election day, when the general election takes place, it's very clear that Trump would have the Electoral College votes to easily win President of the United States, or win as President of the United States. Now, with that said, now that you know exactly what Tim Ryan was reacting to, why don't we hear a little more of what he had to say?
People see the president as older, and it's tough to get rid of that stigma. They don't feel the economic plan working, and his name is on it. And look, I voted for that stuff. I think it's great stuff, but you can't message to somebody, to feel differently than how they feel. And I think that's what they're doing. And so people, I think, are a little bit more nostalgic about, Trump being in office, because I'm not sure things were better then, but they felt like they were, maybe even a pre-pandemic, and that's how they feel. And you've got to respect that. So the message has got to be, we got a ton of more work to do. We've been deindustrialized for 40 years. We've had globalization and automation. I know you're hurting. We're taking this brick by brick, step by step, and we got to keep building on what we did, and then lay out a little bit more of your futuristic agenda. But to just tell them they're doing better, look, I'm a Democrat, but that's just not going to work.
I think Tim Ryan is exactly right about that. So the Bidenomic speeches that Biden has been engaging in have not been persuasive to the American people, because the economy is different today compared to what it was when Trump was in charge. Obviously, the coronavirus pandemic erased some of the progress that was made under the Biden administration, economically speaking. And mostly what I'm talking about there has to do with how well the stock market was doing, which I want to be clear, not every American has buy-in when it comes to the stock market. The majority of shares are actually owned by the top 10% of the country, but there are also a lot of people who have their 401ks tied to the stock market. A lot of people have their pensions tied to the stock market. And so when you start seeing the stock market decline, that does impact some ordinary people. But on top of that, what Tim Ryan is also trying to point out is that inflation is hurting ordinary Americans, right? So when you hear the president of the United States give these glowing speeches about how wonderful the economy is and how much he's accomplished, well, maybe he accomplished some policies which somewhere down the line people will see the benefits of. When it comes to the infrastructure bill that he championed and that was watered down and finally passed through Congress, yes, there are definitely some projects involved that make communities better, that provide more construction jobs. But at the end of the day, these are the types of projects that take some time to come into fruition. What people are feeling every single day in their pocketbooks is how much they're paying for gas, how much more they're paying for their groceries. And when you have the president message something entirely different, message that he's actually accomplished wonderful things for the economy, well, that actually ends up triggering Americans, not in a good way, in a very bad way. It's like, wait, why is he lying to us? Our dollar is not stretching the way that it used to. The other thing to also keep in mind is there are obviously higher interest rates in order to tamp down on inflation. So the Federal Reserve has, of course, increased interest rates, and that increases the cost of borrowing. So people who were in the market for a home, thinking of buying a home, suddenly they're dealing with a situation where prices for these homes haven't really come down at all. It's just that the cost of borrowing in order to get a mortgage to pay for that home has become far more expensive. So people are struggling economically. There's no question about it. And I don't think it does Biden any favors to message something entirely different. At the same time, the way he messages clearly is not effective. He's never really been a great speaker. We all know that. He's not really charismatic. So I think that's working against him as well. And of course, as we've talked about multiple times on this show, he is suffering from the fact that he is older. As I mentioned earlier, Donald Trump is also older, but Donald Trump doesn't appear to be, like the way he carries himself tends to be a little more animated, a little more energetic than what you get from Joe Biden. So I do think that Joe Biden's age is working against him far more than Donald Trump's age is working against him. And that's also clear in the polling. Now, the other thing I want to just quickly mention is that, Tim Ryan isn't the only Democrat who has come out following this New York Times Siena College poll, ringing the alarms, encouraging Biden to drop out of the race. When we initially covered the story, David Axelrod was also one of these Democrats who was like, this is not good. I mean, it's Biden's choice, it's Biden's decision, we'll see what he does, but this is really playing with fire. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what David Axelrod said. And now we're getting some more details about the findings of this poll that should be, I don't want to say surprising. It's a little bit surprising because I wouldn't have thought of RFK Jr. as a candidate that was viable in any way, but he was included in the polling, and the results are fascinating because I think it really illustrates how most Americans feel about Biden and Trump. Most Americans are not looking forward to that matchup. They want almost anyone else. In fact, in that same poll, a generic Democrat would beat Trump by 8 points. So it really does emphasize how selfish Biden is if he chooses to continue on with this sham of running for reelection. And I say sham because he is taking a huge risk for the country when he does that. With that said, I want to talk about RFK and the findings in this poll having to do with RFK Jr. The polling shows that in an average of data gathered from Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Wisconsin, Kennedy has 34% support with voters aged between 18 to 29. And he also has 31% with 30 to 44-year-old voters. That is damning, because remember, when it comes to Joe Biden and how he performed in the 2020 general election, it was really young people who made the difference in these key battleground states. He has lost favorability among that portion of the electorate. I think that Biden is in denial about that, but let's give you more details. So apparently Trump's numbers stand at 29% with 18 to 29-year-olds and 30% with 30 to 44-year-olds. Biden stands at 30% in both categories. Okay, so we're talking about Kennedy garnering about 34% with voters ages 18 to 29 and 31% with voters ages 30 to 44. Now let's focus on some of the battleground states. In some states, Kennedy is winning younger voters by enormous margins. In Arizona, Kennedy has 39% of the 18 to 29-year-old vote to Trump's 26%. And in Georgia, Kennedy leads Trump 35 to 28 in the same demographic. And look, the Trump camp got a little salty toward RFK Jr. after he decided he was no longer going to run as a Democrat and instead he would run as a third-party candidate, an independent. And it's because it does appear that Kennedy is siphoning off more of the vote from Trump as opposed to Biden. But even so, these numbers are not good for Biden either. Biden still has some sway with younger voters in several states, according to this poll, pulling in 37% of 18 to 29-year-olds in both Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. So it really depends on which state we're talking about here. But again, I just want to emphasize, I've got my issues with Biden, as I've shared recently on the show. I do not like his handling of the war in Gaza. I do not like the green lighting and enabling of the just absolute brutality that Palestinian civilians are dealing with right now. That is something that a lot of young voters in the country feel passionately about. Young voters are also incredibly frustrated with the economy. And of course, as with any other election cycle, they're gonna blame the person in charge. And so Biden sees all this, and it seems as though the community around him, establishment Democrats, see all this, and they're starting to really panic. And they're not just panicking behind the scenes anymore, they're panicking openly, they're panicking on the media, they're panicking on social media. They see what is at stake. They see Biden for the shaky, risky candidate that he really is. And the real question is, will he listen to those who are trying to give him good, decent advice? Will he step down? I don't know. Some say that it's already too late. We'll see how it all plays out. But again, I really wish that these calls for him to step down, or not run for reelection, I should say, happened a little earlier. They didn't happen earlier. A lot of people enabled him, and now we're caught in this terrible situation where we don't really have a great Democrat incumbent that we can lean on for reelection. And the other options we have are Donald Trump and RFK Jr., who I'm not personally a huge fan of and is not gonna win the election. Even with the votes that he's pulling away from Biden and Trump, there's no way he's gonna win. So the chances of Trump winning are definitely increased with Biden remaining in the race. And look, I'm saying all this knowing that the big risk that we're taking if Biden steps down and does not run for reelection is that Gavin Newsom might be a candidate. And I don't know what I'm gonna do in that situation because I can't stand Gavin Newsom. But as an objective purveyor of this information, if the concern is that Trump gets reelected, if Democrats are going to run on Trump being an existential threat to our democracy, you can't then have Joe Biden, who is the riskiest candidate, seek reelection. So we'll see how it all plays out. Just wanted to give you guys an update on that.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us, become a Young Turk.